All right, so without further ado, I'll start with my gentleman here to my left.
Hi, I'm Oren Novotny. I'm Chief Architect of DevOps and Modern Software at Insight. I'm also a Microsoft MVP and Regional Director. I've worked quite a bit over my career with front-end desktop applications, trading systems, analytics, visualization, as well as many of the supporting systems behind them on the server. So happy to be here.
Hey everyone, I'm Furmanek, and currently I work as a machine learning guy at Amazon Seattle. But previously I was a .NET developer, backend, frontend. I even did some mobile for iOS. I was called a full stack developer at some point of my career. But I'm also interested in all the low-level internals of Windows and other technologies I'm using. And as well, I'm very happy to be here.
Hey everybody. My name is Matt Soucoup. I work for Microsoft as a cloud advocate. Way back in my previous career, I used to do web form development, and now I am all in on Xamarin and the cloud. As being a cloud advocate, that's actually a good thing. I live in Seattle, Washington, where it is, we were talking before, 34 and foggy this morning, so this is a nice retreat for me. And so with that, pass it on.
Hi everyone, I'm Alex Thissen. I'm from the Netherlands. I'm a cloud architect there at a company called Xspirit. Do a lot of work on backend, so that's my forte. Yes, from the Netherlands. So I'm amazed by all the stories of how long travel takes. The travel from the north side of Orlando to here takes about the same amount of time as from the center of the Netherlands to any border area that you could go to. So yeah, amazement all over.
Good morning. My name's Heidi, Araya. I live in the Orlando area, and I've been in tech for the past 25 years. I'm currently Director of Enterprise Agility at a company called Tenable. And my focus obviously is helping companies through their agile transformation, of which I've been involved with for the past 10 years.
Hi, everybody. My name is Mariah. I'm a software engineer at Webflow, where I work on our designer experience team. I primarily specialize in front end there. And I also, in my spare time, have a passion project called Healthsome. It's a health tracking app for people with chronic illnesses. And it's built in React Native, so it's a little bit front and back end. But because I do all the development for it. Besides that, I build PCs and play video games, so if you want to talk to me about that after, you can too.
Awesome. All right, so we've got some very qualified individuals up here. I will probably be just asking questions, but I'm a big geek as well, so we'll just spare you any more details so you can read the bio. So I'm going to kind of reverse direction, and I want to give every speaker an opportunity to address the core question, right? In 2019, can you be a full stack developer, right? And what does that mean? So does anyone want to go first, or should I just pick someone? Matthew, you're up.
No.
No, he's not up. He's like, I ain't talking, dude. That was all he said.
Now, let me expand. And despite some of my esteemed panelists actually doing full stack development or doing all the things, and me actually doing Xamarin and the cloud, I don't think that you can do everything super well being a full stack developer. I would specialize, let's say, in Xamarin, and I could do Xamarin and iOS and really well, but I don't know if I could do Android super duper well. And so I think to be able to do Xamarin, to be able to do iOS, Android, do some cloud like authentication, to be able to do functions, to be able to do DevOps, all super well, and to be an expert in all of those, I'm going to say no. Could you know a bit about all of them? Sure. But be an expert in all of them? No.
Mariah.
Well, I mostly agree with that. That's why I said I specialize in front end, but as someone who started, my first internship was in QA. So I did, a lot of test automation, manual testing, server inventory, but I also did, CD builds, pipelines, like building them out, and I brought that into, my first job in the industry. So I've worked across a lot of different areas, built and maintained pipelines, built and maintained test automation suites. built out front end and back end, and because I'm building a whole app where I did not only like the front end design aspects, but designing the database for the back end and all of that. I mean, there are some things that I know that I'm weaker on, which is part of the reason why I use services to help me accomplish that. But I think I would argue that a full stack developer is not necessarily an expert across all areas of the stack, but is capable of competently working within all areas of the stack, which is, again, why I said I specialize in front end, but I have a lot of experience across the whole thing, so.
Okay, thank you. Oren.
Well, I would argue, it is on. Hello, okay. I would argue that where's the line? I mean, I've done the front end, I've done the back end, but even when I'm doing the back end, I'm not writing x86 or ARM instructions, am I? I mean, maybe some of you are, but at some point, there's going to be a level of abstraction somewhere. We're relying on a platform like .NET or Node or Python, and then we're running on an operating system. It's Windows or Linux or Mac. Are you writing syscalls? Maybe. Maybe you are in some cases, but are you writing and debugging the entire application from the user entering in, a mouse or moving their input device over to the UI, over across the wire to the network in that stack, up and over to the server, processing that input, and then back down and back into the I/O and managing the disk performance and writing the disk drivers and all that? I think the answer is pretty clearly no. So the answer is, at some point, there's an abstraction, there's a line, and we can pick and choose some portion of that we can excel in.
Alex?
Okay. The way I look at it, we've mentioned a couple of things. That there's so much to cover. Jack of all trades, master of none comes to mind. So the T-shaped profile where you are across the board and just one specialization, or maybe the E-shape, which is a newer thing with multiple things going down. And I think it's all moving so fast, and I don't want to steal your thunder here, but I'm thinking it's like with the glass that is half full, half empty. That you might have a half full stack developer, which is kind of like the attitude that so many things are changing that if you want to survive in this ecosystem, that you would actually have to do continuous learning, and that maybe is over to you.
I am so glad you said that. When I look at job recs today for full stack developers, very few of them are actually focused on the people aspect, but no longer can we just shut ourselves in and code all day unless you're working on an application by yourself. So we need to collaborate with others when we do our work, and that means we need, like you said, continuous learning mindset. Things are changing rapidly. We need to inspect and adapt, and most of all, be able to get along with other people, have emotional intelligence. So I would argue, full stack developer, you cannot be a full stack developer without focusing on the human aspect as well.
Interesting. Adam, would you like to comment on the core topic?
So it depends. I would say you cannot be a full stack developer if you are talking about technical stuff. Obviously, there are so many changes every single day, new JavaScript framework every week, so you cannot be a full stack developer. But for me, it's more about of the business value. The code, the platform, the technology, the machine, it's always about providing a value to people. And if I can provide an end-to-end value from the very beginning to the very end, whether it's a CRUD application, whether it's a machine learning process or whatever else, then why wouldn't I be called a full-stack developer? Now the thing is, if I want to master some of those technologies, obviously this is always a very nice thing to be an expert in something. But I don't think one needs to be an expert. I think at some point it's all about trade-offs, that okay, we can even master our application, make it better, reliable, whatever else, but the code is ultimately just an expense, a code we need, like a cost we need to pay to deliver this value. So at some point it's worth like putting a line somewhere and saying that is good enough, you don't need to be way better than you are now or develop this application way better than it is now, because the value for people is already good enough. So it's always question about setting the correct expectation.
Okay. So there was some great things said, and I see Mariah would like to add something fantastic. I'm just going to throw two words. I'm just going to say the words, and I would love you all to riff on it. competence and abstraction, and I'll throw in an extra adjective, leaky abstraction. So go ahead.
Well, I was actually going to touch on the people aspect because, like you said, when you're coding alone. But I want to point out that even though I'm coding alone on it, it's a very empathetic project for me, and I'm not working on it completely in isolation. It's for my community, so the disabled community. I have a disability. I have PTSD. So I'm partly building the app for myself, but I'm partly building it for friends that I know struggle with the same thing. So even if you are coding alone, a lot of the time, being a full stack developer means coding with empathy, not just for your users, but with your coworkers as well, if you have any. But that's all I want to say.
Anybody want to riff on that? Or let's go back to the competency, because there's empathy, which brings back to that human aspect of going beyond yourself. And what is that aspect? GitHub is popular because of social coding. You can be alone in your room, yet program with a team across the world, right? So some people figure, though, if I'm going to contribute to this project, I have to be competent. I have to know this entire thing. What do you guys think? Oren, you run a lot of open source, and I know Matt's involved as well, so we'll do both of you.
So I think there's always an opportunity for folks to contribute, and being competent is, I don't really like the word because I think everyone has something they can add, whether it's someone that has never really experienced or worked with a particular technology before, or whether there's an expert. There's both a role to play in that the expert can help mentor and teach the new folks and help them encourage the new, the next generation. And some of that being social is a key aspect of that because we have to be able to communicate our intent and our requirements and feedback appropriately. You don't want to say, hey, no, your code sucks. I mean, that's not constructive. That's not helpful. That will discourage the person who's trying to learn, and that's not really useful for anyone. So being able to understand how to channel feedback, how to phrase things appropriately, and how to encourage that collaboration in a setting like a code review or a pull request is really, really important, and I would consider a core competency of really any engineering or technical discipline.
Matthew?
I couldn't agree with the being empathetic more. Just be able to sit down and be able to listen. So it's always listen first and try to understand first where the other person is coming from. And to be competent, I mean, let's define competent as be able to pass a certification in whatever technology. And I would argue absolutely not. You do not have to be competent in order to start developing or do database administration or whatever tech stack we're talking about. In fact, I would almost say that you would rather not be competent. That way you're open to more ideas. And that way, let's say my colleagues here are competent and I'm not, and they come in with the empathetic mindset. I think that way we both can learn more that way. And that kind of riff off of Oren's point of being open source is super, super intimidating to get into at the first stop. But you're going to find out a lot of the maintainers are friendly and they want, well, one, they want the help, and two, that it's a giving community. And I guess what I'm trying to say is even though you might not be competent in OSS or you may not feel that you're competent, is that the maintainers of the project are helpful and they're taking PRs or they're taking issues, and it's just a friendly community. So don't be afraid to put issues in or make suggestions or put a pull request in.
Adam, it looked like did you want to say something?
I could add that being an expert in something does not mean that you always need to use all your expert knowledge to develop something or to deliver something. Sometimes it's actually better to not use all the magical things you learned at some point and all the super high level or low level tricks because first, okay, then you are on your own with supporting this, which is not nice. And second, you need to explain this to everyone and people are not necessarily very familiar with those concepts. Sometimes it's easier or actually better to make the code longer or using slightly less or fewer sophisticated patterns, but still more, understandable for typical developer for maybe newcomer to the platform, because then it's much easier to work on something together than when you are on your own. So that's what I would raise. And in open source, it may be especially important because like introducing hacks here and there, it's cool when you think about it, but it's not cool in longer term. And also for people working on these things, it's easier when you don't have hacks here and there, no matter how clever they are.
Yeah, and I'd like to expand on that a little bit, where I think part of being an expert and understanding the human aspect is knowing when to use the right technology for your customer. It's not enough that this is awesome and cool for you, is that this is a developer. You have to think about who's going to be using this and who's going to be maintaining this in the long haul. There was a case several years ago where we had done a proof of concept application for a client, and we used reactive UI and sort of some of the reactive extensions for a lot of streaming data going back and forth. And it was a really good use case for this technology. However, it was also one of those things where I had to get up and explain this on whiteboards, how this stuff worked. And at that point, it's kind of you're losing the audience, and you need to take a step back and say, look, just because you can do it this way doesn't necessarily mean it's the right solution, and you might need to stop and rethink that so that it can be more maintainable in the long run.
Okay, you mentioned competences and abstractions, and I was thinking, okay, I think most of us are very competent in what we do. It's just a matter of, do you have the knowledge that you need? That would mean learnability and just-in-time knowledge, because I think we can pick up almost anything based on the knowledge that we already have and the experience that we gathered, because things are changing fast, but it's still the same all over again, just a new framework, a new thing. And then from the learning perspective, I think we might be our own biggest adversaries. Resistance to change, the new thing that is there, and you're like, oh, this is not my time yet, this would not work for me. Stepping out of the comfort zone, digging into something new, forcing yourself to pick up on that and really get to know PowerShell, for example, because we didn't use it yet, and I'm so familiar with all the other stuff except PowerShell. But then making yourself do it, out of the comfort zone, growth mindset, that's, I think, where you can be. If you're competent, you can get the knowledge and keep growing.
So I'm gonna go right to Heidi, because I know we start at tech, and then there's this weird thing, we're driving back to the human aspect. Go ahead, Heidi.
Yeah, I actually wanted to say, when we talk about competence, I find that people often have impostor syndrome. They think that they're not actually competent to contribute, but actually others may look at them as great contributors. So we considered that when we're talking about our learning and competency.
Yeah, I would also say that it can be intimidating, especially in open source, when you feel like you don't know enough to contribute. But honestly, as a maintainer, in the past I've done open source work, it's often actually extremely helpful for newcomers. I don't want to say competence, because I don't really like that. But for newcomers, people who are new to contributing, because it helps point out where the bottlenecks are with getting started, with contributing to the project, with where the problem areas are as far as documentation goes. So if the maintainer is paying attention to the kind of questions that you're asking, it may even help them better maintain their project for the future.
Anybody else real quick? Okay. I want to shift gears though, because I asked this a lot. Some of you have been in my talks this week. Anybody work for free? Does anybody not like a paycheck? Anybody? Always looking for an intern, right? Okay, so here's the thing. You all have jobs. These people want to work for money. Isn't it a better way for them to stay employed or get a job to be a full stack developer? Because, I mean, I get the messages on LinkedIn, right? Brian, you look like you could do, well, I haven't got Chloe's Bitcoin and cryptocurrency one yet. But the fundamental aspect is, right, that maybe makes me more employable. Anyone want to comment? Do we stretch the truth? Do we allow marketing to drive who we are? Adam?
I would say that it can be very misleading. I remember once at at some point during my career, I basically became a DevOps full stack C# front-end, back-end, everyone guy. And I was leaving the company, they actually had to hire 3 people instead of me. So yeah, it sounds great. I'm doing like work of 3 persons, but in fact, it's not the best idea, because then when I look for some other job, no one's going to believe me that, yeah, you're a DevOps C# front and everyone in like, you do all those things. So that's first, it's very misleading. And second, you actually do the job tuned for the very specific project or very specific company you are working on. It is not necessarily interchangeable with other companies or with the knowledge you need to, which is required on the market. So while you may know all the, let's say, cloud environments and know S3 and all the Azure Blob Storage and all the storages and everywhere else, it doesn't make you necessarily like a cloud expert for all of them. And what's worse, you probably just focus on the storage, which is not the only thing in cloud. So I would say it can be a very misleading thing to think that a full stack is more employable, while Paycheck sometimes disagree with that statement.
Now, Heidi, I think one of the things that this gets to me is because I know you deal a lot with agility and stuff like that. So is it possible we need a better term to say, I play well with others and am a good developer?
Yeah, I think so. Ability to learn and potential for learning is much, much more important, because tech skills come out of date so quickly that really 2 years from now, if you're still at the same company, you probably won't be using the same skills that you had before. So it's much more effective, from my perspective, when I'm looking to screen somebody for hiring, is to have them demonstrate that they have a learning mindset and can learn quickly than their exact competency in a skill right at this particular moment.
Matthew, did you have something?
Yeah, I was going to say, you have to make it past the first round of screening, though. And a lot of that first round of screening might be a recruiter, might be HR who do not understand what tech is. So how do you do that? I don't know. I mean, I think you have to research the job first and know exactly. Maybe you have an in, maybe you connect over LinkedIn or something and find out what that first round of screening is. So that's tough. How do you do that? But secondly is, if I would ask you, Brian, where are you going to bring your car to get fixed? Are you going to bring it to a place that advertises bicycle and car repair? Or are you going to bring it to a place that advertises car repair?
Touche.
So, yeah, I mean, it's tough. Where do you have to know what you're getting into before you get into it.
Heidi, was there an extra thing there?
Yeah, like fundamentally, it's a challenge for sure, especially when I talk to recruiters, and the recruiters at my current company is not only to look at exactly the skills that the person has right now, but the human aspect also. So it's this transition that I feel we're facing from people as machines to people as humans and what they can bring on an ongoing basis.
All right, the audience, I have a question, so let me come down. From the monitors. All right.
Yeah, on that note, so we're a crazily growing company and we're hiring over 30 people, and you know, it's one of these checklists, right? We have 500 things and that no one's ever gonna even, you know, meet 2/3 of. How do you, and we're looking for lots of people. We could have front end, we could have generalist, full stack, back end. I feel like when they do these, we want 100 things, it's very intimidating, and people, I feel like people aren't gonna apply, or we get people in the interviews like, well, I'm not really good, and I'm like, it's okay, you're smart, you can learn this, you know. We're looking for smart people, I think everyone is, but the way you advertise jobs today, I mean, it looks like a laundry list of things that no one can qualify. How do you communicate that what's the best way to, when you're advertising jobs for something like that?
So let's get some input. Anyone want to start? Go ahead.
I mean, there's no perfect solution, but I find, and I'm speaking as somebody on the other end when I apply to jobs. So the biggest thing for me is jobs that focus more on qualities rather than specific technologies. If you're really looking for somebody who has the ability to learn and grow and all of that, then the stack and this and that, it shouldn't be a requirement to have experience with it. So I find that shorter job descriptions, but more about the kind of person that you're looking for and less about the kind of technologies that you're looking for experience with. At least that's what's encouraged me to apply to certain jobs, so that's just from my experience.
Anybody else?
Yeah, I agree with what you said about the qualities. So focusing on principles and qualities like ability to demonstrate a learning mindset. It might be something that you could include in the job description instead of just a laundry list of technical skills. Or you could include some key technical skills and say, some proportion of these, if, ideally has exposure to some percentage of these technologies if that is in fact important to you. But focusing on the other skills that they'll need when they enter into your company, if it's growing rapidly, some other key traits that you're looking for that aren't just tech related.
And on a quick side note, and I'll come over and answer questions, Billy Hollis, one of our esteemed speakers and senior members, has a new course on how to interview developers coming out this December. So take a look for that. So that might help you out as well. Okay, so real quick, and then I'll come over. I saw a hand. Anybody else want to comment on that, or we feel pretty good we're covered? Covered, okay. Come over here. Here you go.
I just had a comment about hiring people. Skills are fine, ability to learn is good. You need to get along with your team. If you are an a-hole, we don't want you. I mean, that's all. I have found over time, working with so many people and with my team, that becomes the most important thing.
Thank you.
Be careful about when many interviews will have a so-called culture fit test, and that can often or many times lead to subtle or biases creeping up. What do you define as culture, and what's the fit? I mean, and are you going to then, if you're putting people through a so-called culture lens, are you going to get a diverse team and bring in more diverse ways of thinking? So not saying that they don't need to be respectful and professional in an environment. Of course, that's critical. But you certainly have to be careful of the line between what's getting along with the team versus what's the right culture and distinguishing that.
All right, you started it.
I don't think what I meant had anything to do, it's not limited to a certain group of people. That's a human quality. You can just be kind of, you could be white, black, Indian, whatever, and get along or not. So.
Completely.
Okay, I'll come back to you. Are we on topic here? Are you shifting gears?
Okay, so I think the third gentleman said something about you basically, to get through first screening, you kind of have to stretch the truth a little bit and, check the boxes for the, but at the end of it, we've all gone through it. There's a technical test. Do you think there's still value in the technical test for the full stack developers in 2019?
Now, I didn't say stretch the truth. I said know your target. Right? So, I mean, don't go applying for a Java job if you're just a .NET developer and you don't know Java. Know where you're applying for. Now, a technical test, that's interesting, right? I mean, how many people have gone through a whiteboard interview? How many people have liked doing a whiteboard interview? Right? our everybody person here. But they're incredibly unfair, right? And I saw a joke on Twitter where somebody said, I did a whiteboard interview, and they just drew a Google search box, right? But so back to the question, though, how do you measure tech skills during an interview? And that's really hard. And when I used to do a lot of interviews, that's something that me and my team struggled with, is that you have to account for somebody being nervous. You have to account for somebody maybe not, your questions are going to be inherently biased towards the project that you're working on, and it just goes on and on. So where do you draw the line on how do you scope that out? And it's tough to put that in. So at least when I did interviews, we tried our best to take all that into account, in that we did ask technical questions, but they were on a basic level, and it really was just seeing really if we, kind of getting back to the point before, if we like that person, and to see if they at least knew at a basic level of like, let's say C#. So just kind of getting back to the competency level before, they could spell C# maybe, and we could get along.
That's actually also what we do in our assessments that we have. We ask them questions, and there's 3 of us with the candidates, and we always can corner them if we wanted to, but most of the time they might not get an answer correctly, but it's more the way people look at how do they deal with the failure, so to speak. How do they recover from it? Are they adaptive? And if we come back to a similar topic later in the interview, did they show learning? So that's again what we've mentioned a couple of times: the learnability, the growth mindset, and also from the cultural fit kind of thing. What's the attitude that people have? Do they get defensive, or do they show that okay, please explain me what was wrong and how could I do this better? And that's kind of how we pick the people that we think will fit well, and they don't have to be an exact cultural fit, because minded makes everything the same, but sometimes it's also good to have somebody that thinks a little bit differently from a technical perspective or interaction. So it's about that kind of thing.
Heidi?
I have something to share that will also touch on her a-hole aspect, and that is if you sit them down for a team or pair coding or mob programming session, then you'll see how they will interact with you, and you'll also get to see how they interact with the rest of the team, and you can glean a lot of information on how they interact with other people just by sitting down and doing a team exercise. Has anyone thought of that?
Mariah, did you want to comment?
Yeah, so I was gonna actually comment on probably the best interviewing experience I ever had was not obvious. It was not a whiteboard interview, but it was, you're given this small assignment to do, not time box, but within a few days, week, get back to them. And this is especially important for me as somebody with a disability who's not neurotypical. A lot of the whiteboard interviews and stuff like that don't really work for me. But I find that the code challenge, code review process that I went through when I was interviewing was probably the best one, because not only did I get to see how the team I would be working with gave me feedback and if it was a good fit for me personally, but they got to see how I responded to the feedback and if that would be a good fit for the kind of culture that they were looking for in the team. But you do have to be very careful with culture fits. I find that having a rubric ahead of time to score is probably the best way to make sure that you're not leaking bias into that culture fit examination. But yeah, that's what I want to say.
Great. You had a question? He's passed. All right. Anybody? Oh, you're going to make me go all the way back. All right. I'm coming. Fat man's moving. All right.
So I teach at a community college, and we have no problem producing software engineers. Companies are looking for it. Even right now, I keep getting emails that we want entry-level students. But one problem I can't overcome is that there are people with disability. They may not be strong disability, but a lot of them are slow. In other words, they would need extra time or they would need extra accommodation, but they can do the work. But I'm finding that I can't place them. Do you have any suggestions or comments on it? How do I place them? They're pretty good people. They're really good students. They have completed the course. In fact, one of the students had all A's, but nobody wants them.
I don't have suggestion for that. The only thing I could say is every single company always expects you to meet the deadline, and the deadlines are obviously short and you cannot cross the deadlines, but it's not true. So if company really tells you that, hey, this is final deadline Friday afternoon, 6 p.m., you need to stay overtime and do the job, then you come to the office on Monday and you realize it didn't matter whether you delivered it on Friday or not, then it's probably the question about the company now, whether you would like to work there or not, because we are all human beings, and putting everything to deadlines is not necessarily the best way. So while I know this is not the answer for you because you because you teach at school and you probably have some other companies, these types of companies around. But what I'm getting at is always important to tell others that, hey, even though this company expects you to do this, or this is how it worked out, doesn't mean that all the companies around the world, they do so. So just look for, maybe you'll find some other opportunity somewhere else and you'll feel better that way.
Also, has someone set expectations for the companies about the new graduates perhaps not being as fast as someone with a lot more experience? I'm wondering if there's some level setting there that could be had.
Someone else keep talking.
I would like to add to that if you feel the need to convince a company to make a place for somebody who is either a junior and so less experienced and needs more time than a more experienced engineer, or because they have a disability, you need to protect those entering with disabilities, because if you have to convince a company to find a place for them, they're probably not going to be supported the way that they need to be at that company. So it's really important to make sure that you're not putting them into an environment where they will struggle. It's really life-changing to be at a company that actually supports you, especially when you have a disability. And there are laws, and obviously, but being in a truly supportive company is different than just following, say, the ADA. So I would say that it can be really discouraging, especially as somebody with a disability, to try to find a place where you feel like you fit, but to not try to force yourself into a place where you feel like you don't fit or you won't be supported, because it will not be a good experience.
This is a multi-part hypothetical, but hopefully not too difficult.
Where's the whiteboard?
You have to hire 7 developers for an application. Is there any part of the stack you feel is most important to have an expert on that stack? Would you rather have a team of all experts of each part of the stack, or a team of all competent full stack developers?
I'll maybe start with that, coming from a consulting background. So we do this all the time, and we put together teams for custom applications and clients, and 7 is a bit larger for a typical team. I mean, there are certain issues of scale. 5 or 6 is maybe more typical. I would tend to say we would lead with a senior, strong architect who can partially work as an engagement manager and interface with the customer or the client. And we're going to have a mixture of maybe a couple of senior or more experienced developers and several junior developers. And we need that mix in order to, A, maintain a commercial model. I mean, bill rates are reality, and customers won't want to pay for 7 principal architects. It's just not affordable. But more practically, you don't need 7 principal architects. In fact, something like that, you're going to have like too many cooks in the kitchen. Too many different opinions may hinder you more than someone who's just looking to learn and understand. And so you need to have that good mix in your team of skill sets. I wouldn't necessarily qualify that as front end or back end or full stack. I would look at it as more experience in the problem domain and in that criteria.
Anybody else? Heidi, Adam?
Answering this question literally, I would go with expert in every single layer than with full stacks, if I were to choose like 7 experts or 7 full stacks. That's because there are so many things which you can easily break, and it's always good to have a person who really knows the stuff and can help you in that area. But answering literally this question, I guess it's not what we should be answering. I guess I would rather say that, yeah, I would agree. It's better to have like 1 principle or limited number of principles, because it's better to like follow one direction which is consistent across the project. It may not be the best direction. it probably is not the best direction. Obviously, if you have 7 principals, every one of them will think he is the only right or she is the only right, but obviously they disagree in every single case. So sometimes it's better just to take on, just to disagree and commit, okay, we think it's not the perfect solution, we know that it has some drawbacks, but at least we are consistent and we are pushing forward. So in real case, I would just go with similar model, like one principal, seniors and juniors as well, to first have this diverse perspective and second have consistency to move forward.
Anyone else, or are we good? All right, I've got another question right here.
To the question that we started with of being a full stack, one thing that hasn't been mentioned is the size of your organization. I work in higher ed. Our university has 9 campuses. We have close to 10,000 students, so we're kind of small, but there's 4 of us that, I'm the manager, and I have 3 underneath me, and we have to do everything from the database, the application coding, supporting the application, everything. We're soup to nuts. So in that kind of environment, while not every one of us knows everything about everything we support, we do overlap heavily. So just a comment.
Well, we've had that. Is there a problem fundamentally with your team size in your orgs? Do you feel like you're understaffed and feel that that's where the name full stack came from? Anybody want to comment? You don't have to, but you should.
Well, I used to work for a 1-person company, and that person was me, and I had to know database, SQL, Oracle, so it was T-SQL. I had to know JavaScript, and I hated it. And it's just the way, I feel for you. It's just the way things are. I wasn't an expert in it. And I guess that's where my point was before, is that, yes, you can be a full-stack developer. I don't think you can be an expert in everything, but you do sometimes have to pull the weight yourself and know everything, at least to a medium-sized, in-depth portion of it. And I think everybody here, just by demonstrating that they come to a conference to learn more, is more than capable of doing that.
So this is kind of question or maybe a comment, because these beautiful ladies before said that when as an applicant, I would look for the quality. So I partly agree with that, because nowadays companies are applying the AFS system. I believe it's like an automated filtering system when they hire people. And I believe they put the filters on your qualification and tech skills than your personal skills. A person might be a quick learner, or maybe very well get along with the team, but he might be out of 10, he has a 7 tech skills to be in that company. And the company has really well culture maybe, and he really wanted to be in that company. But just because the AFS systems, I would say, he just go out of that system, and his resume or maybe his qualification never get picked up. So do you feel that is a good way to judge a person? Because the personal skills are you cannot just look at the resume and then just judge a person and then get an idea about that person.
Go ahead.
I never heard about this system, but I can imagine it's working out there. It seems very plausible. The thing is, you always need to find a balance. You can say that, hey, we are not necessarily looking for an expert in some technology. That person must be willing to learn, and that person will learn. It's not necessarily true, unfortunately, because you want to have also people who are willing or are capable of, rescuing the production service on Friday night when it's going down. You don't have time to learn about debugging memory dumps at that point. You just need to have that knowledge. On the other hand, assessing people just based on their skills, blindly with no chatting with them, I find it obviously dumb, because it's not about the skills you have, it's not only about the skills you have, it's about who you are as well. So generally, if this system works, I would say, someone asked me already today how I would recommend getting into some company. I just think you need to toss a coin times to finally find a best fit. So obviously you have this whole hiring hiring process is like aiming to have so many false negatives, like we reject candidate because, okay, the cultural fit or whatever else. So we just need to toss a coin, and I don't have a solution for that. Some people don't like whiteboard interviewing questions, okay? Some people love them. So people would like to do a homework for a week. Some people do not. There is no single silver bullet solving all of that. So my recommendation is always, okay, didn't work here. Okay, just accept it, carry on. There are so many companies around that you will find your fit finally. That's what I believe.
So we're going to do a wrap up. I'd like each of you to give your one piece of wisdom. And so to put some balance on that, I think we agree that full stack can mean something, but there's a lot of depth to this idea of tech versus human balance. So I'll start over at the end with Mariah, and just come through and just give your one tip about how do you stay relevant in this industry and have a happy 2020, either in a job or find a job, however you want to lead.
I would say the biggest thing that I notice, even in the conversations that we're having and the kinds of questions that are being asked, is that to move away from this like black and white mentality, right? That it doesn't have to be yes or no. It doesn't have to be just hiring for cultural fit or just focusing on technical skills. To really, it's about balance. It's about balance in your job when you're doing full stack work. If you are, it's about knowing your weaknesses, your strengths, and also when interviewing, not just interviewing for a job, but interviewing candidates. It's about balance. That's what I would say.
For me, I would think about keeping an open mind and listening carefully. It's about the learning mindset and accepting feedback. So for every job interview that you might go to, ask them for feedback and how you could have done better if you didn't get the job, and keep an open mind and listen.
I would say that if you work at a company with other people, not being a single person, it's like a hive mind. Collectively, you know so much, and it's the step that you need to make for yourself to admit that you can't know everything and ask for help. Because if you ask for help and you know who knows, then you can actually know everything, because if you don't know it and you can ask for help with someone that you think, okay, he in the team does know, then that's where it all starts, the knowledge transfer and learning and being able to cope with everything.
I think one of the ways to make because we just start talking about like how do you find a job, how do you get past the initial screen, is one of the ways to make yourself stand out from the crowd. And let's face it, you do have to stand out. It's not all idealistic, is to maybe write a blog or start contributing to open source and actually make a name for yourself. And as bad as that sounds, you do have to stand out. So it's there, but you also have to find a nice, healthy balance to put the computer away at times. And at least for me, that's hard. I really like what I do, and I would do it for a minimal cost. And so it's
awesome.
It's tough, but you have to make sure you do it so you have more energy when you get back to it. So, and when you do write a blog, you actually find out you learn a whole lot more, and you can be empathetic to your readers when you try to explain things, how things are done.
I would say be a chatterbox. Whenever you read something, talk about that. Whenever you have a challenge at what you are working on right now, just yell in the office, either for help or, hey, look, I'm doing this magical thing. Whenever you learn something, go blog about that, speak about that, run a brown bag, run a meetup, go for a conference. Just keep talking, because that's how you meet new people. You may be surprised how many great people are there around you, which you would never think they are interested in those things. So it's just about expanding your network and finding more people who are willing to share the passion. And when you do share the passion, then I guess you will be motivated to work even more, and you will find better companies, and you will actually learn things you would never think you can learn. So that's the way to go, at least in my opinion.
So I would suggest taking a step back and thinking about what it is you enjoy doing. We spend 8-9 hours a day working, maybe, sometimes more, sometimes less. That's a good chunk of your life. Do you enjoy what you do? Is there certain aspects of it? Is it the problem solving? Is it a specific technology? What is it? and find your passion. And I know that sounds cliche, but it's, you know, it is important to enjoy what you do. If there's an area that you enjoy more than others, maybe try and go deeper on that. So find that, and the passion and the interest really does show through. People will find out, it will help you stand out, like the other gentleman said. If you wanted to be the best at something, don't do it because you think it's, you know, important. Do it because it's interesting to you, and that will drive and fuel your desire to learn more and, you know, be a better person.
So as always, I'll say thank you to each and every one of you for coming to the show, for coming to the panel. This is a great life, and so without you, we wouldn't have it. It's a community, so thank you very much. Please give a warm round of applause for our speakers.